Welcome to Phyll the Love. I'm your host, Bryan Carey, and I know it's been a while since my last video, but we're back. I took a bit of a hiatus to do some strategic planning, and I needed some more space to grow, both for my plants and myself. So I left Virginia and I'm here in Georgia. So quick recap of what we did last go around. I showed you my apple trees in the self-contained miniature greenhouses, and then also how to start your own morning glories with your own apparatus to allow them to grow up the railing in a self-contained fashion. So those were my passion projects at the time that I captured on film. Lots of other things that I didn't get the chance to show, but we're going to expound upon that. So starting with the new interest of mine that I've developed, terrariums. And this is a small test one that I made on a tiny scale. And today we're going to be doing this. Let's check it out. So, the lava rock, which is very porous, it will allow the excess water from the soil to drain through after we equip it with our screen. So you just want to level this out, and this is what it should look like. So you see the screen just rests right on top of the lava rocks. There's a little bit of space in between it because these are small to medium-sized lava rocks. They're not what I wanted, but we're gonna make do. This is a large terrarium, so we'll be fine. Built up our drainage layer with the lava rocks and the screen. We're gonna want to add our activated charcoal. So this will add an additional layer of filtration and allow us to filter out any impurities that are in the water that's going to circulate inside of our closed system. And this is also going to help reduce the amount of mold and mildew that may accrue inside of the container. And that's something that you really want to be mindful of, being that this is a closed environment. So now that we have our substrate sloped out, and I like the shape of the terrain here, we need to moisturize it. So one of the many mistakes that novice plant owners make is using straight tap water. And so what you want to do, if you're going to use tap water, you want to let it sit uncovered for at least 24 hours to allow the chlorine for the fluoride to evaporate. Otherwise, what you end up is you have crispy edges on your plant. So sometimes, like around the leaves, they'll get brown and dried up. That's oftentimes caused by straight tap water. So this has been purified. I've also let it sit for, like I said, 24 hours uncovered to let all the excess chemicals evaporate from it. And so I'm just gonna go around here and give it a nice spritz. The secret here is you don't want to oversaturate the substrate, but you want to make sure that it's well moisturized. I'm gonna go around here nice and evenly. So I think we're safe with putting a little bit more water in here than you go with a smaller one. Yeah, that's a good point to make. The amount of water you put in here should be directly proportional to the size of the terrarium. Now I'm going to take a piece of paper towel and just go around the side of the container. I'll wipe out the excess moisture that I put in there. So now it's time for the stars of the show. The main focal point that I want to have in here, I'm going to put this in the center of the terrarium, is going to be this beautiful Tradescantia. It's a hybrid, and I got this cutting and I propagated it, and it's been doing very well. As you can see, it has some roots that are poking out here as well. And so, fun fact, they're also known as inch plant, and another name that Kanye West might not like, but these plants are very vigorous growers, so I'm going to have to continually prune this, and you could take the tops that you cut off of this and propagate and do something else with it. But that also actually encourages lots of bushy growth to make it a lot fuller, and it's going to fill out the terrarium nicely. But it's something that I have to be mindful of, because if not, it could take over, even though it is the focal point. So then I have also, I really like plants with red and pink, purple undertones, and this is no exception. This is a Begonia Rex. So this is another one that I propagated. I am going to cut the larger leaf off, being that it has two parts where it's actually taking off and has several smaller leaves. This was only going to grow to a very finite size because it's going to be restricted to the size of the container and then compete with resources. So hopefully the leaves won't get too much larger than this, and I can end up cutting off these ones eventually and then propagating them elsewhere to help fill out the tank and give it some more visual variety. Then I also have these smaller varieties of Tradescantia, and I think this is a Pink Panther. I could be wrong on this, let me confirm for that. I'll put it in the video for you in the notes. But I have two of these cuttings that I've also propagated, two of the very same species. Then I have a few pieces of red vein Phytonias. So they have this beautiful pink color veins, which is actually, it's funny they're called red vein, but it's more pink than anything. So I have a few of these. I also have a few different species of moss that I've been harvesting the past few months, including this one. So I'm still learning about moss, but I've been collecting and harvesting it for a few months, like I said, and cultivating it in these little containers. So this one I just got this weekend. It's from back home in Virginia. If you know the name of it, please drop it in the comments. But it looks very lush, and I want to use this as like a carpeting in the foreground of the terrarium, since it is a smaller grain version of moss. And then I also have what appears to be either star moss or cushion moss that grows pretty vigorously around from where I live at here in Georgia now, and just got this being cultivated in this. So I want to take this and I'll probably put this towards the middle ground or the background, one of the two, but the other one's gonna be the focal point. And then I also have this kind of moss that I'm gonna put intermittently throughout the terrarium as well, just for more visual variety. So this is what I mean when I say the Tradescantia is a very vigorous grower. This is maybe a month and a half, 2 months worth of roots, and it has several sheets. When I got this, it was only one. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different shoots already. So like I said, this is going to be the focal point, and we're going to continue to prune this and fill this out, and then I can take this and do other things with it, maybe a different terrarium, or maybe I have it out here in the open on my plant display. So first, I'm going to take my tools and make a hole in the center for my hybrid Tradescantia. Fill in around the roots. So this is what it looks like. So now I'm going to put the smaller variety of Tradescantia in there. And you want to be very careful with your tools to not damage the cutting or the root structure. So I am going to, where do I want to put this? Actually, let me make a small opening to where I want to put this in the foreground. And I'll make another one for the other one. So now I'm going to take the other JOSHUAvsMOVIES cutting that I have, and I'll place this here in the other hole that I put in the foreground. So now it's starting to come together. Hopefully you can start to see the vision. So I actually had a change of heart. I don't want this to become too overwhelming because this is going to fill out and continue to grow in. I'm just going to use one of the red vein photons as opposed to the 3 cuttings that I originally laid out. So now I'm going to add the Begonia Rex. And anyone who knows me knows I've been on a huge Begonia Rex binge for the past year or so. Started off with one cutting that I had a few years ago, and as of recent, I found a bunch of different varieties I like. So I've been growing them, cultivating them, propagating them, and eventually they're going to take over. But we're going to add this one here for a nice pop of color. This one has more prominent hues of red as opposed to the green and the pink from the JOSHUAvsMOVIES and the Phytonia. So I'm just going to add this in. I'll put this in the background. So now very carefully, I am going to actually turn it this way and nestle it in. And kind of turn it. Perfect. I'm actually not going to put this piece of Phytonia superba in there. So for one, it doesn't have any roots yet, which I wasn't really too concerned about because you can easily propagate this. But it doesn't fit thematically with the other plants that I have in here. As you can see, the vibrant pinks and reds that I have in here. And I'd much rather leave that for a different project. So these are the lava rocks that I got, and I am going to use them, like I said, for the hardscape. Unfortunately, these are not the right size. These are maybe small or medium, but not large enough for the hardscape. So I'm going to have to improvise and try this technique that I found online, and we're gonna see how it goes. This is my very first time doing this. All right, so the technique is you take multiple of the rocks or hardscape that you want to configure together, and I'm just playing around with placement right now. And I actually like this. It has some space in between them to where the moss can adhere to when I do add that. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take some paper towel and put in between these individual pieces, and then I'm gonna super glue it. Word of caution, if you're gonna be doing this, be very careful. Super glue. I have a thing about textures, and I just hate the feel of super glue on my fingers. So if you're gonna work with this, make sure you have acetone on hand to cleanse all that stuff off your skin. So I am just going to rip this paper towel up into small pieces. Then I am going to take my rocks apart. I gotta remember where I put them, which faces what side, and then I'm gonna apply the super glue. a few seconds, maybe a few minutes to bond. So I'm just gonna press them together like so. And then on the outside, around the edges, I'll add some more super glue. And don't worry about if you have too much glue on the outside that's gonna dry, you can always file it down with a blade or something like that. I'm gonna go ahead to the other edge right here, the other face, and just let the super glue saturate the crevice and fill it out. So now that the first two are bonded together, I'm gonna take my third rock, and I just wanna place it here, and this is where I'm gonna secure it. So I'm gonna do the same process. I'll add the glue on this face. So now I'm gonna take the rock that we just bonded the different pieces together with the moss, and I'm going to place it in the back here, and we're gonna play with the placement. I don't like that. That's better. So now the terrarium is really starting to take shape because the hardscape is starting to give us some more form. So I'm gonna actually put some more moss on the backside of the rock, put a lot more moss in here actually, but especially on the backside of this rock. And I'm hoping that the shade will encourage some more growth, especially in the background. So I'm just gonna take my tools, my forceps, and insert some more moss around the bottom. Do the very same thing over here. And on the back. So that's the background, and then I'm gonna take this other piece, the other smaller rock that I've already bonded, and I'll put some moss. I wedged it in between there as well. I'm going to place this in the foreground, like so. Give you an aerial view. I'm gonna do this very same thing. Put some more moss around that. Okay, so those are two of the moss, well, two pieces of hardscape, same species of moss, and I have some others. This one that I want to put in the background, so I'm going to cut some pieces of that, and I have another one that I think I showed earlier in the video. So I already took that, I rinsed it off, got the excess dirt out of it, and broke it up into smaller pieces. So let me get that and we'll be right back. So now this is actually, I think this might be my favorite kind of moss. This is the one that I found at my granddad's house. I'm actually just gonna trim the bottom of this off, or at least some of it. And of course there is gonna be some dirt in there with it, but a lot of it is the base, which you can cut off safely. just removed a little bit of it, not too much. Just to flatten it out. And so this is what I'm left with. Isn't this beautiful? I don't care if you agree or not. So now, in my foreground, I'm actually just gonna place this in, since it's a larger element. Probably getting broken anyway when I put it in the tweezers. Four sides. I'm just gonna pat this down. Like so. And then I have some smaller pieces that I've broken off. So now actually I want to put some more rocks to make it look a little bit more natural, and then also provide some shade for the moss so it doesn't get too overburdened with the sunlight. So I'm gonna just grab a few pieces. I'm gonna place this one. I'm gonna do this one here. Give the, try to skank you something to lean against. All right. I'm loving this. And nobody put no corny ass McDonald's music in the comments. Now I'm gonna take my scissors and I'm just going to cut a piece of this off. So one of the things, I'll make a second video just focusing specific on moss because it's really fascinating. A lot of people step on it, walk past it all the time, don't think anything of it, but it's actually, like I said, really fascinating. And there's some things just to consider when harvesting natural moss to reduce the impact of your terrarium. So introducing invasive species for one, introducing pathogens. Those are probably the two biggest things that I could think of right now, and how to properly store them. Because like I said, I had this in the container for maybe, this has been here for at least a month at this point. So I'm just gonna do the very same thing and trim off some of the excess at the bottom. So I could, or maybe you wanna see that, sorry. So I'm gonna trim, like I said, some of the stalk of the moss, at least the brown portion, off so I can get it to set flush against the substrate. And this is just one patch. So I'm gonna take this and let's actually break this up, because I don't want to just have big clumps of the same thing inside the terrarium. That kind of defeats the purpose of having different varieties of mosses. So I'm gonna break it up into clumps about this size, and maybe one a little bit, okay, this one came off too, so a little bit smaller, and I'll break this in half as well. And yeah, let's do this one too. So in total, I have 1, 5 clumps of this moss, and then just some random pieces that fell off. So I'll find something to do with those too. I'll put them in there and wedge them in somewhere for some more visual interest. Oh my God, this is so beautiful. All right, so I'm gonna take this moss. It's starting to fall a little bit. Let me focus back in on it. So this, I'm going to place it here. Oops. I actually have tools for that. Let me do things the right way. Make it easier for myself. Okay, so here is our terrarium, and quite impressed, if I might say so myself. This is my first attempt at a large-scale terrarium. The only other experience I had with terrarium building was the small one that just had some moss and some Tradescantia in it, just to see if it was sustainable. Also with the, even though it's this small, I still put the drainage layer in it, in the screen, just to get that hammered out, get my techniques refined. But yeah, like I said, this looks great. I'm super impressed about it. And there are, well, two very important things that we can't forget. So firstly, I'm gonna put some additional moisture in there because, like I said, the moss uptakes moisture from the air, or its leaves rather, but make sure the humidity is in there is nice. And all right, so I think this is good. I don't think there's too much moisture in there. If there is, I'm gonna be observing this very carefully over the next few days, and I might take the lid off and let some of the humidity out just to allow it to stabilize and get to the right level, because I do want to avoid mold. But on the topic of mold, I actually have two friends that are gonna help with that. So there's two species of microfauna, which are just really small organisms. You might call them bugs, but they're invertebrates. So the first of which is going to be the springtails, and the second is going to be the isopods. So because they're so small, it's going to be hard to see them in here. Oh, so this is an isopod. And that one happens to be a wild one I just threw in the tank they piggybacked in there on some moss that I gathered. But the main species I have in here is they're white dwarf isopods, and I don't see any. So I'm gonna have to fish out a few of those, and then I'll also have to get some springtails. So springtails, you can tell when you find them because they're small white bugs, and when you touch them, they'll use their tails to catapult. I actually found, okay, you can't see that. This is really hard to talk and explain this stuff while I'm actively looking for them. But the point is, I am gonna have to figure something out, especially for the white dwarf isopods, because they like to burrow. They're not like that wild one that I just threw in there, because I'll see him in there all the time, just in the top surface layer, just crawling around. He's a little bit shy, but not as much as the dwarfs. So I'm going to, well, I was hoping that the pieces of apple, so I cut off some small slices of apple and I put them there because introduce some other organic material into the moss container. So as that breaks down, the main point of the isopods and the springtails is that they are the cleanup crew. They help with breaking down any decomposing material. They're both detritivores, so they do exactly that. Anything that's dead, decaying, they'll clean it up. And then also the springtails, they will help out with any moss or excuse me, mold or fungus that might be growing inside the container. So they keep it nice and healthy and recycle any materials. And also their waste will nourish the plants. And also the isopods themselves, when they burrow into the substrate, they'll create aeration for the soil, which is important. You don't want to have compact soil when you have your plants. They still need oxygen, believe it or not, and need some aeration. So that helps with root development, root growth, and just a healthier ecosystem that we're cultivating, because essentially this is a closed ecosystem that I curated, we curated. So yeah, let's find some isopods and some springtails. I don't know if you probably can't see this. But I do have, well, I also have 2 springtails, but there's at least 1 on here. And so I'm just gonna tap this. He's in. And now I just have to gather up a few more. Once they get settled in, they actually reproduce pretty quickly, so I'm not concerned about it, but it's just gonna be a pain initially to make trip back and forth, trying to find them and get them to get on the leaf so I can get them. But even more so with the dwarf isopods, because I'm actually gonna have to dig in the substrate for those. Between now and then, I might decide to go buy some more. So here is actually one of the white dwarf isopods that I was able to dig up in the substrate. It wasn't too hard, they were directly underneath the apple under the soil. But just for size comparison, how small they are compared to my finger. So one of the really neat things about this species is that they're really hardy because they reproduce through parthenogenesis, which is asexual reproduction, or a form of asexual reproduction rather. So once you have a few of them in there, they establish a culture usually pretty quickly. So here is the white dwarf isopod before drop them in. That was easy enough. Now I just have to do that about 20 more times. Last looks before we seal up our terrarium. So I was actually able to get quite a few of the white dwarf isopods in here, but I'll probably still order some more and top it off with maybe 10 more. And I definitely will have to go to PetSmart and get some springtails, because I did not get as many as I would have liked, and those are going to be vital for, like I said, keeping down any kind of mold or fungus that's going to be growing in here to keep our plants nice and healthy. This terrarium build was a ton of fun, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I actually had this idea that I was floating, in which I would do a live stream terrarium build once a month with a specific theme. So if you're interested in that, let me know down in the comments. Also, I have several other projects that I'll be doing spanning the gamut of my plant interest, be it from my fruit trees, cultivating my yard, or cross hybridization experiments, which are one of my personal favorites. But if you're interested in seeing something, or if I come up with something new, I'll be on the lookout for new videos. But in the meantime, be sure to check out other great content here on the Infusion Network, from Joshua's Good, Bad, and Ugly, or our flagship show, the Infusion Breakdown Show. Until next time.